You know that feeling. The weight of an unfinished task pressing against your consciousness like a persistent ache. You've promised yourself you'll start working on it tomorrow, next week, after this one last episode, after you organize your desk, after you check social media one more time. The deadline looms closer, and still you find yourself doing anything but the thing you know you should be doing. You're caught in the familiar dance of procrastination, and you're certainly not alone. Procrastination isn't simply laziness or poor time management, though it often masquerades as both. It's a complex psychological phenomenon that affects nearly everyone at some point, yet remains one of the most misunderstood aspects of human behavior. You might blame yourself for lacking willpower or discipline, but the reality is far more nuanced and perhaps surprisingly more forgiving than you might think. At its core, procrastination is your mind's way of protecting you from something it perceives as threatening. That threat might be failure, success, judgment, perfectionism, or simply the discomfort of engaging with a difficult task. Your brain, in its ancient wisdom, has decided that avoidance is the safer path, even when your rational mind knows better. This internal conflict between what you know you should do and what you actually do creates the familiar frustration and self-criticism that accompanies procrastination. Understanding procrastination requires looking beyond the surface behaviors to examine the deeper psychological mechanisms at play. It's about recognizing that your tendency to delay isn't a character flaw, but rather a learned response to stress, uncertainty, and the complex emotions that surround challenging tasks. When you begin to see procrastination through this lens, you can start to develop more compassionate and effective strategies for working with, rather than against, your natural tendencies. The architecture of avoidance. Your brain is constantly making calculations about threat and safety, comfort and discomfort, immediate gratification and future rewards. When you procrastinate, you're witnessing this ancient system in action. The task ahead of you triggers a stress response, and your brain helpfully suggests an alternative, anything else that feels safer or more immediately rewarding. This process often begins with a subtle shift in your emotional state. You might notice a slight tightening in your chest when you think about starting that project, a sudden urge to clean your workspace, or an overwhelming desire to check your phone. These are early warning signals that your avoidance system has activated. Your mind has classified the upcoming task as potentially threatening, and it's mobilizing your attention toward literally anything else. The fascinating thing about this process is how automatic and unconscious it often is. You might find yourself browsing the internet without even remembering the decision to open your browser. You started thinking about the task, felt that familiar discomfort, and suddenly you're 3 articles deep into reading about something completely unrelated. Your brain has successfully diverted your attention away from the perceived threat. This avoidance mechanism served your ancestors well when threats were immediate and physical. The ability to quickly redirect attention away from danger and towards safety was literally a matter of survival. In your modern life, however, this same system often misfires, treating a work presentation or difficult conversation as if it were a predator stalking you through tall grass. The irony, of course, is that avoidance often makes the original threat more real. The project doesn't disappear because you've ignored it. It simply accumulates additional stress as the deadline approaches. The difficult conversation doesn't resolve itself. It often becomes more difficult the longer you wait. Your brain's attempt to protect you from discomfort ends up creating more discomfort, trapping you in a cycle that can feel impossible to break. The emotional landscape of delay. Procrastination is fundamentally an emotional regulation strategy, though not a particularly effective one. When you postpone a task, you're not just managing time, you're managing feelings. The task itself might trigger anxiety about your competence, fear of judgment, overwhelm about the scope of work involved, or perfectionist concerns about meeting impossibly high standards. Procrastination offers temporary relief from these uncomfortable emotions. This emotional component explains why logical strategies often fail to address procrastination effectively. You might create detailed schedules, set reminders, or promise yourself rewards, but if the underlying emotional triggers remain unaddressed, you'll likely find yourself stuck in the same patterns. Your rational mind understands the importance of the task, but your emotional mind is running the show, prioritizing immediate comfort over future consequences. The emotions driving procrastination are often more complex than simple anxiety or fear. You might discover that you're avoiding a task because completing it successfully would challenge your identity in some way. Perhaps you've always seen yourself as someone who struggles with a particular type of work, and succeeding would require updating that self-concept. Or maybe you're afraid that doing well will lead to higher expectations and more responsibility than you feel ready to handle. Sometimes procrastination serves as a form of rebellion against external expectations or internal pressure. If you feel forced to do something, even if it's objectively in your best interest, part of you might resist simply to maintain a sense of autonomy. This rebellious aspect of procrastination often intensifies when the stakes are high or when you feel micromanaged or judged. The shame that typically accompanies procrastination creates its own set of emotional complications. You might find yourself avoiding the task not just because of the original emotional triggers, but because approaching it now means confronting your own avoidance. This shame spiral can make the task feel exponentially more difficult as time passes, creating a feedback loop where the longer you wait, the harder it becomes to start. The perfectionist paradox. One of the most counterintuitive aspects of procrastination is its relationship with perfectionism. You might assume that perfectionists would be less likely to procrastinate, given their high standards and attention to detail. In reality, perfectionism and procrastination often go hand in hand, creating a particularly frustrating dynamic. When you hold yourself to impossibly high standards, starting a task becomes inherently risky. What if your work doesn't meet your expectations? What if you make mistakes? What if others judge your efforts as inadequate? Procrastination offers a temporary solution to this dilemma by allowing you to maintain the fantasy of perfect future performance while avoiding the reality of imperfect present effort. This perfectionist procrastination often manifests as endless preparation. You might spend hours researching the perfect approach, organizing your workspace, or waiting for the ideal conditions to begin. While these activities feel productive, they're often sophisticated forms of avoidance that allow you to feel busy without actually engaging with the core task. The all-or-nothing thinking that characterizes perfectionism makes it difficult to work incrementally. If you can't do something perfectly, your mind suggests, why do it at all? This binary approach ignores the reality that most worthwhile accomplishments emerge through iterative improvement rather than single moments of perfect execution. Your first draft doesn't need to be your final draft, but perfectionist thinking makes it hard to embrace this truth. Perfectionist procrastination is particularly insidious because it often looks responsible and conscientious from the outside. You're not being lazy, you're being thorough. You're not avoiding work, you're preparing properly. This self-deception can make it difficult to recognize the pattern and even harder to change it. The overwhelm factor. Sometimes procrastination emerges not from fear of imperfection, but from a sense that the task ahead is simply too large or complex to tackle. When you look at a big project, your mind might struggle to find a clear starting point, leading to a paralysis that feels different from fear-based avoidance, but results in the same behavior, doing nothing. This overwhelm-based procrastination often involves a kind of cognitive overload. Your brain tries to process all aspects of the task simultaneously, creating a mental traffic jam that makes forward movement impossible. You might find yourself thinking in circles, considering various approaches without committing to any of them, or feeling exhausted by the mere thought of beginning. The complexity of modern tasks contributes to this overwhelm. Unlike the concrete physical tasks that dominated most of human history, much of your work today involves abstract thinking, multiple variables, and uncertain outcomes. Your brain, evolved for simpler challenges, sometimes struggles to find traction on these multifaceted problems. Breaking large tasks into smaller, more manageable pieces is often suggested as a solution to overwhelm, and this advice is sound as far as it goes. However, the emotional component of overwhelm often requires additional attention. You might need to acknowledge and validate the legitimate difficulty of what you're trying to accomplish before you can effectively strategize about how to approach it. The instant gratification economy. Your procrastination doesn't exist in a vacuum. It's shaped by the environment you live in. The modern world is designed to capture and monetize your attention, offering an endless stream of immediate gratifications that make future-focused work feel comparatively unrewarding. Every notification, every colorful app icon, every algorithmically optimized piece of content is competing with your long-term goals for your immediate attention. This environmental factor makes procrastination more challenging to overcome than it might have been in previous generations. Your ancestors didn't have to resist the pull of social media while trying to focus on important tasks. They didn't have entertainment options available at the touch of a screen. The friction involved in finding distractions was much higher, making sustained attention easier to maintain. Understanding this context can help you develop more realistic expectations for yourself. You're not weak for struggling with focus in an environment deliberately designed to fragment your attention. Recognizing the external forces at play can help you make more informed choices about how to structure your environment to support your goals rather than undermine them. The dopamine-driven feedback loops of modern technology create a particularly challenging dynamic for anyone trying to engage with longer-term, less immediately rewarding tasks. Your brain learns to expect quick hits of satisfaction, making the delayed gratification inherent in most meaningful work feel comparatively unsatisfying. The stories you tell yourself. The narratives you construct around your procrastination often become self-fulfilling prophecies. If you tell yourself you're lazy, undisciplined, or fundamentally flawed, these stories shape how you approach future tasks. They become part of your identity, making change feel not just difficult but impossible. Many of these internal narratives are inherited from earlier experiences. Perhaps a teacher once criticized your work habits, or a parent expressed disappointment in your follow-through. These early messages can echo in your mind years later, influencing your self-perception and behavior in subtle but powerful ways. The story of procrastination as a personal failing is particularly damaging because it focuses on character rather than behavior. When you see procrastination as evidence of who you are rather than something you do, change becomes a matter of fundamentally altering your identity rather than simply adjusting your approach to tasks. Questioning these narratives requires a kind of gentle skepticism about your own self-talk. When you notice yourself thinking, "I always procrastinate," or "I'm just not good at this," you can pause and ask whether these sweeping generalizations are actually true. Are there times when you don't procrastinate? Are there areas where you do follow through consistently? Usually a more nuanced and accurate picture emerges. The neuroscience of now versus later. Your brain is engaged in a constant negotiation between your present self and your future self, and this negotiation significantly influences your tendency to procrastinate. The part of your brain responsible for immediate desires and impulses is more ancient and, in many ways, more powerful than the newer regions responsible for long-term planning and abstract thinking. This neurological reality means that your future self often feels like a stranger to your present self. The benefits of completing a task next week feel abstract and distant, while the discomfort of starting it right now feels immediate and concrete. Your brain, quite reasonably from its perspective, chooses the option that provides immediate relief from discomfort. Research in neuroscience suggests that when you imagine your future self, your brain activity more closely resembles how it responds to thinking about other people than to thinking about your current self. This neurological distance makes it easier to make decisions that benefit others in the future than to make decisions that benefit your future self. Understanding this biological bias can help you develop more effective strategies for overcoming procrastination. Rather than relying solely on willpower or discipline, you can work with your brain's natural tendencies by making future consequences feel more immediate and present. Benefits feel less compelling. The social dimension of delay. Procrastination isn't always a solitary struggle. It's often influenced by social factors that might not be immediately obvious. The expectations of others, your role within various groups, and the cultural messages you've absorbed about work and productivity all play a part in shaping your relationship with tasks and deadlines. Sometimes procrastination serves as a form of communication. By delaying a task, you might be expressing resistance to someone else's agenda or asserting your autonomy in a situation where you feel controlled. This dynamic is particularly common in workplace settings, where you might feel micromanaged, or in relationships where there's an imbalance of power. The fear of judgment from others is another significant social factor in procrastination. You might delay starting a task because you're worried about how others will perceive your efforts. This fear of external evaluation can be so strong that it overrides your own desire to complete the work, trapping you in a cycle where avoiding judgment becomes more important than achieving your goals. Social comparison also plays a role in procrastination. When you see others apparently effortlessly completing similar tasks, you might feel inadequate by comparison, leading to avoidance. Social media exacerbates this dynamic by providing a constant stream of others' apparent productivity and success, often without revealing the struggles and setbacks behind those polished presentations. The hidden benefits of procrastination. While procrastination is generally viewed negatively, it sometimes serves functions that aren't immediately apparent. Understanding these hidden benefits can help you address procrastination more effectively by finding alternative ways to meet the underlying needs it serves. For some people, procrastination creates a kind of artificial deadline pressure that actually enhances performance. The adrenaline rush of working under tight deadlines can improve focus and creativity, leading to work that feels more inspired than what might emerge from steady, consistent effort. If you're someone who thrives under pressure, the key might not be eliminating procrastination entirely, but learning to create that pressure in healthier ways. Procrastination can also serve as a filtering mechanism, helping you identify which tasks are truly important versus those that can be safely ignored. If you consistently avoid certain types of work, it might be worth examining whether those tasks align with your values and goals. Sometimes procrastination is your unconscious mind's way of protecting you from commitments that don't serve your best interests. The incubation period that procrastination creates can also lead to better solutions and more creative approaches. While you're avoiding the conscious work of engaging with a task, your unconscious mind might be processing the problem in the background, leading to insights that wouldn't have emerged through immediate linear effort. Breaking the cycle. Understanding triggers. Effective change begins with awareness, and overcoming procrastination requires understanding your personal triggers and patterns. These triggers are often subtle and automatic, making them easy to miss if you're not paying attention. Environmental triggers might include certain locations, times of day, or types of tasks that consistently lead to avoidance. You might notice that you procrastinate more when working from home, during certain hours, or when facing tasks that require particular types of thinking or skills. Emotional triggers are often more complex and require careful observation to identify. You might procrastinate when you feel overwhelmed, judged, uncertain, or pressured. Sometimes the emotional trigger isn't directly related to the task itself, but to other stresses in your life that make any additional challenge feel insurmountable. Physical triggers can also play a role in procrastination. Fatigue, hunger, poor lighting, uncomfortable seating, or other physical discomforts can make it easier to avoid tasks than to engage with them. Your body's state significantly influences your mental capacity and willingness to tackle challenging work. The power of micro-commitments. One of the most effective approaches to overcoming procrastination involves making your commitments so small that they feel almost silly to avoid. Instead of committing to work on a project for 2 hours, you might commit to opening the relevant document. Instead of planning to exercise for 30 minutes, you might commit to putting on your workout clothes. These micro-commitments work because they address the emotional resistance that often drives procrastination. The smaller the commitment, the less threatening it feels, making it easier for your brain to say yes. Once you've started, momentum often carries you forward naturally, but even if it doesn't, you've still succeeded in meeting your commitment. This approach requires a shift in how you define success. Rather than measuring success by the amount of work completed, you measure it by your consistency in honoring your commitments, no matter how small. This builds trust with yourself and creates positive associations with the process of starting. The key to effective micro-commitments is making them so small that you can complete them even on your worst days. If you can only honor your commitment when you're feeling motivated and energetic, it's probably too large. The goal is to create a baseline of engagement that you can maintain regardless of your emotional state. Reframing your relationship with discomfort. Much of procrastination stems from an attempt to avoid discomfort, but this avoidance often creates more discomfort in the long run. Learning to tolerate and even welcome the discomfort that comes with challenging tasks can fundamentally change your relationship with procrastination. This doesn't mean embracing suffering for its own sake, but rather recognizing that some discomfort is an inevitable part of growth and accomplishment. The discomfort you feel when starting a difficult task is often much less intense and long-lasting than the discomfort of avoiding it, but your brain's bias toward immediate comfort makes this hard to remember in the moment. Mindfulness practices can be particularly helpful in developing a different relationship with discomfort. By learning to observe uncomfortable feelings without immediately reacting to them, you create space between the trigger and your response. This space allows you to make more conscious choices about how to proceed. Reframing discomfort as information rather than a problem can also be helpful. Instead of seeing the anxiety you feel about a task as evidence that you should avoid it, you can view it as useful data about what matters to you and what challenges you're ready to grow into. The role of self-compassion. The harsh self-criticism that often accompanies procrastination tends to make the problem worse rather than better. When you berate yourself for procrastinating, you're adding shame and stress to an already challenging situation, making it even harder to engage with the task at hand. Self-compassion involves treating yourself with the same kindness you would offer a good friend facing similar challenges. This doesn't mean making excuses for procrastination or lowering your standards, but rather approaching your struggles with understanding and patience rather than judgment and criticism. Research suggests that self-compassion actually increases motivation and follow-through compared to self-criticism. When you feel safe and supported, even by yourself, you're more likely to take the risks inherent in engaging with challenging tasks. Self-criticism, by contrast, often triggers defensive responses that make change more difficult. Practicing self-compassion around procrastination might involve acknowledging that struggling with avoidance is a normal human experience, recognizing the legitimate challenges you're facing, and speaking to yourself in a way that's both honest and kind. Creating systems over relying on motivation. Motivation is unreliable. You can't control when you'll feel motivated, and waiting for motivation to strike is often another form of procrastination in disguise. Creating systems that support your goals regardless of your emotional state is much more effective than relying on inspiration or willpower. These systems might involve environmental changes that make desired behaviors easier and undesired behaviors harder. If you want to write more, you might set up a dedicated writing space that's always ready for use. If you want to exercise regularly, you might lay out your workout clothes the night before. Systems can also involve social accountability, whether through formal arrangements with friends or colleagues, or through public commitments that create external pressure to follow through. The key is finding the right level of external structure to support your internal motivation without creating additional stress or resistance. Effective systems are usually simple and sustainable, rather than complex and ambitious. A system that requires significant daily effort to maintain is likely to fail during busy or stressful periods. The best systems become so automatic that they continue functioning even when you're not consciously thinking about them. The integration of work and life. Procrastination often emerges from a disconnection between the tasks you need to complete and the life you want to live. When work feels separate from or opposed to your personal values and goals, it's natural to resist engaging with it fully. Exploring the connections between your daily tasks and your larger purposes can help reduce procrastination by making individual actions feel more meaningful. This doesn't require dramatic career changes or life overhauls. Often, simply understanding how current tasks contribute to future goals is enough to increase motivation. Sometimes procrastination is a signal that you need to make adjustments to better align your commitments with your values. If you consistently avoid certain types of work, it might be worth examining whether those commitments truly serve your best interests or whether they're driven by external expectations that don't match your internal priorities. The goal isn't to love every task you need to complete, but rather to understand how those tasks fit into the larger context of your life and goals. This broader perspective can provide the meaning and motivation needed to push through temporary discomfort and resistance. Moving forward, a new relationship with time and tasks. Overcoming procrastination isn't about becoming a person who never delays or avoids challenging tasks. It's about developing a more conscious and intentional relationship with your choices about when and how to engage with the work of your life. This new relationship involves accepting that some procrastination is normal and human, while also recognizing when avoidance patterns are interfering with your goals and well-being. It means being curious about your resistance rather than critical of it, and experimenting with different approaches rather than insisting on a single solution. The journey away from chronic procrastination is often gradual and non-linear. You might have periods of consistent follow-through followed by times when old patterns resurface. This is normal and expected. Lasting change rarely follows a straight line. As you develop new patterns and approaches, you might discover that your relationship with productivity and accomplishment shifts as well. Tasks that once felt overwhelming might become manageable. Projects you once avoided might become sources of satisfaction and growth. The parts of yourself that you once criticized might become allies in creating the life you want. The path forward involves patience with yourself, curiosity about your patterns, and a willingness to experiment with new approaches. It requires recognizing that procrastination, while often problematic, is also profoundly human, and that understanding it with compassion is the first step toward changing it. You have the capacity to develop a different relationship with the tasks and challenges in your life. This capacity doesn't require becoming a fundamentally different person. It simply requires bringing consciousness and intention to patterns that have previously operated automatically. With time, practice, and patience, you can learn to work with your natural tendencies rather than against them, creating space for both productivity and peace in your daily experience. The work of overcoming procrastination is ultimately the work of becoming more fully yourself, understanding your patterns, honoring your needs, and making conscious choices about how to spend your time and energy. It's challenging work, but it's also deeply rewarding, offering the possibility of a life lived more intentionally and authentically. In recognizing procrastination as a complex psychological phenomenon rather than a simple character flaw, you open the door to more effective and compassionate approaches to change. You create space for understanding rather than judgment, curiosity rather than criticism, and growth rather than self-attack. This shift in perspective might be the most important step in developing a healthier relationship with the tasks and challenges that fill your days. Your procrastination patterns developed over time in response to various internal and external pressures, and they can be changed with the same patience and persistence with which they were formed. The key is approaching this change as an ongoing process of self-discovery, rather than a problem to be solved once and for all. Through this lens, even your struggles with procrastination become opportunities for learning more about yourself and developing greater self-awareness and compassion. The future you're working toward isn't one where you never experience resistance or avoidance, but one where you can recognize these experiences as information rather than instructions, and where you have a variety of tools and strategies for responding to them consciously rather than automatically. This is the true freedom that comes from understanding and working with your procrastination patterns. not the elimination of all difficulty, but the development of your capacity to meet difficulty with wisdom, patience, and skill. The seasonal nature of procrastination. Your procrastination patterns likely fluctuate with various rhythms in your life, much like the seasons. There are times when forward momentum feels natural and effortless, and other times when every task feels like pushing through thick mud. Understanding these natural cycles can help you work with your energy patterns rather than against them. These seasonal patterns might align with actual seasons, with many people finding their motivation and focus affected by changes in daylight, temperature, and weather. The shorter days of winter might naturally lead to more inward focus and less outward productivity, while the longer days of summer might energize you toward action and completion. But your personal seasons might follow different rhythms entirely. You might have weekly cycles where certain days feel more conducive to challenging work, monthly patterns that align with your body's natural rhythms, or longer cycles that correspond to major life transitions or stress levels. Some people find their productivity naturally peaks in the morning, while others don't hit their stride until evening. Recognizing these patterns allows you to plan more intelligently, rather than expecting consistent performance regardless of your internal weather. During your naturally low energy periods, you might focus on maintenance tasks, preparation, or planning. During high energy periods, you can tackle the most challenging or important work. This seasonal approach to procrastination also helps normalize the experience of struggling with motivation. Just as you wouldn't expect flowers to bloom in winter, you can extend similar understanding to your own cycles of engagement and withdrawal. This doesn't mean using natural rhythms as an excuse for indefinite avoidance, but rather working strategically with your patterns to maximize your effectiveness over time. The generational context of procrastination. Your experience of procrastination is shaped not just by your individual psychology, but by the broader historical and cultural moment you're living through. Each generation faces different challenges around focus, motivation, and task completion, and understanding these generational factors can help you contextualize your own struggles. If you're part of a generation that grew up with the internet, your brain developed alongside technologies designed to fragment attention and provide instant gratification. This means your neural pathways may be more susceptible to distraction than those of people who developed their fundamental attention patterns before the digital age. This isn't a judgment about your capabilities, it's simply a recognition of how environment shapes development. Similarly, if you're entering the workforce during a period of economic uncertainty, the traditional motivations for completing tasks, job security, predictable career advancement, long-term financial stability, might feel less reliable than they did for previous generations. When the future feels uncertain, it's natural for your brain to struggle with tasks that are predicated on that future being stable and predictable. The cultural messages you've absorbed about work, success, and productivity also influence your relationship with procrastination. If you've grown up with social media presentations of others' productivity and achievement, you might have unrealistic expectations about what normal productivity looks like. The curated highlight reels of others' lives can make your own natural struggles with motivation feel more shameful and isolating than they actually are. Understanding these generational and cultural factors can help you develop more realistic expectations for yourself and more effective strategies for working within your actual context rather than fighting against it. You can acknowledge the unique challenges of your historical moment while still taking responsibility for your responses to those challenges. The body's role in procrastination. Your procrastination patterns are intimately connected to your physical state, though this connection is often overlooked in discussions that focus primarily on psychology and behavior. Your body's needs, rhythms, and conditions significantly influence your mental capacity and willingness to engage with challenging tasks. Sleep deprivation, for instance, can make everything feel more difficult and threatening than it actually is. When you're running on insufficient rest, your brain's threat detection systems become hyperactive, making even routine tasks feel overwhelming. This can lead to procrastination that seems to come out of nowhere, where tasks that would normally feel manageable suddenly feel impossible. Nutrition also plays a crucial role in your ability to focus and follow through. Blood sugar fluctuations can dramatically affect your mood, energy, and decision-making capacity. If you're trying to tackle important work while your body is struggling with nutritional imbalances, procrastination might be your system's way of conserving energy for basic survival functions. Physical movement and exercise have profound effects on your mental state and capacity for focus. Regular movement helps regulate stress hormones, improve mood, and enhance cognitive function. When you're sedentary for long periods, your body and mind might both feel sluggish, making it harder to generate the energy needed for challenging work. Environmental factors like lighting, temperature, air quality, and noise levels also influence your ability to focus and engage. If your workspace is too hot, too cold, too dark, or too chaotic, your body might resist spending time there, leading to procrastination that seems to be about the task, but is actually about the environment. Paying attention to your body's needs and creating physical conditions that support focus can dramatically reduce procrastination without requiring any changes to your psychological approach. Sometimes the most effective intervention is as simple as getting adequate sleep, eating regular meals, taking a walk, or adjusting your workspace to be more comfortable. The relationship between procrastination and creativity. The relationship between procrastination and creativity is complex and often misunderstood. While procrastination can sometimes interfere with creative work, it can also serve important functions in the creative process that aren't immediately obvious. Many creative individuals report that their best ideas come during periods of apparent procrastination, while taking a shower, going for a walk, or doing mundane tasks. This suggests that what looks like avoidance might actually be a necessary part of the creative process, allowing your unconscious mind to work on problems, while your conscious mind is occupied elsewhere. The pressure to be constantly productive can interfere with the natural rhythms of creative work, which often involves periods of apparent inactivity that are actually essential for generating new ideas and insights. If you're creative, your procrastination might sometimes be your mind's way of protecting space for this non-linear, non-productive thinking that's essential for innovation. However, procrastination can also become a barrier to creativity when it prevents you from actually engaging with your creative work. The key is learning to distinguish between productive procrastination that serves your creative process and avoidance that prevents you from doing the work at all. Understanding your creative rhythms can help you work more effectively with your natural patterns. You might discover that you need periods of apparent inactivity before you can engage deeply with creative work, or that your best creative work happens when you're not trying to force it. This awareness can help you plan your creative projects more realistically and reduce the guilt and frustration that often accompany creative procrastination. The evolution of your procrastination patterns. Your relationship with procrastination isn't static. It evolves as you grow and change. Patterns that served you at one stage of your life might become obstacles at another stage. Understanding this evolution can help you approach your current struggles with more perspective and patience. In your younger years, procrastination might have been a way of asserting independence or rebelling against external expectations. As you mature, those same patterns might shift to serve different functions, perhaps protecting you from taking risks that feel too large or maintaining a sense of safety in an uncertain world. Major life transitions often trigger changes in procrastination patterns. Starting a new job, ending a relationship, becoming a parent, or facing health challenges can all affect your capacity for focus and follow-through. What worked for you before the transition might not work afterward, requiring you to develop new strategies and approaches. Your procrastination patterns might also evolve as you gain more self-awareness and life experience. You might discover that procrastination in one area of your life is connected to deeper issues around self-worth, fear of success, or unresolved conflicts. As you address these underlying issues, your procrastination patterns might shift naturally without requiring direct intervention. This evolutionary perspective can help you approach procrastination with more curiosity and less judgment. Instead of seeing current struggles as evidence of permanent character flaws, you can view them as information about your current needs and challenges. This opens up space for growth and change rather than resignation and self-criticism. The ripple effects of procrastination. Procrastination rarely affects just the specific task you're avoiding. It creates ripple effects that can impact multiple areas of your life. Understanding these broader impacts can help motivate change while also helping you address the full scope of how procrastination might be affecting you. Chronic procrastination can affect your relationships, as others might perceive your delays as lack of commitment or consideration. This can create tension and conflict that extends far beyond the original avoided task. Your procrastination might also model certain behaviors for others in your life, particularly if you have children or are in leadership positions. The stress and anxiety that accompany procrastination can affect your physical health, sleep quality, and overall well-being. The constant background tension of unfinished tasks can be exhausting, even when you're not consciously thinking about them. This can create a cycle where stress makes tasks feel more difficult, leading to more procrastination and more stress. Procrastination can also affect your sense of identity and self-efficacy. When you consistently avoid tasks, you might begin to see yourself as someone who can't be trusted to follow through, which can become a self-fulfilling prophecy that extends to other areas of your life. On the positive side, successfully addressing procrastination patterns can create positive ripple effects throughout your life. As you develop greater self-trust and follow through, you might find yourself taking on new challenges and opportunities that previously felt too risky or overwhelming. The path forward. Integration and practice. The journey toward a healthier relationship with procrastination is ultimately about integration, bringing together your understanding of the psychological, physical, social, and practical factors that influence your patterns, and developing a personalized approach that works with your unique circumstances and challenges. This integration requires ongoing practice and adjustment. What works for you during one period of your life might need to be modified as your circumstances change. The key is maintaining a stance of curiosity and experimentation, rather than rigidly adhering to any single approach. Remember that progress isn't always linear or dramatic. Small, consistent changes in how you approach tasks and manage your energy can compound over time into significant improvements in your overall functioning and well-being. The goal isn't perfection, but rather greater consciousness and choice in how you respond to the challenges and opportunities that fill your days. Your procrastination patterns, while sometimes frustrating and limiting, are also a source of valuable information about your needs, fears, and aspirations. By approaching them with understanding rather than judgment, you create space for the kind of growth and change that leads not just to greater productivity, but to a more authentic and fulfilling way of living. The hidden wisdom of procrastination. What if your procrastination isn't always the enemy you've made it out to be? What if sometimes it's actually your unconscious wisdom trying to protect you from something that isn't quite right? This perspective doesn't excuse chronic avoidance, but it does suggest that your procrastination might sometimes contain valuable information that deserves attention rather than immediate dismissal. Sometimes you procrastinate because a task truly isn't aligned with your values or priorities, even if you can't consciously articulate why. Your unconscious mind might recognize that a commitment doesn't serve your best interests, leading to resistance that manifests as procrastination. This kind of procrastination might be trying to tell you something important about what deserves your time and energy. Other times, procrastination might be your psyche's way of slowing you down when you're pushing too hard or moving too fast. In a culture that often glorifies constant motion and immediate action, procrastination can serve as a natural brake system, forcing you to pause and consider whether you're moving in the right direction at the right pace. Your procrastination might also be protecting you from taking on more than you can realistically handle. If you're already overwhelmed, your unconscious mind might create resistance to additional commitments, even ones that seem important or exciting. This protective function of procrastination can prevent burnout and help you maintain some semblance of balance. Learning to distinguish between protective procrastination and destructive procrastination requires developing a more nuanced relationship with your own resistance. Instead of automatically assuming that all procrastination is problematic, you can learn to pause and investigate what your avoidance might be trying to communicate. The mythology of peak performance. Much of the shame and frustration around procrastination stems from cultural myths about peak performance and optimal productivity. These myths suggest that high-functioning people never struggle with motivation, never delay important tasks, and maintain consistent levels of output regardless of circumstances. These beliefs create unrealistic standards that make normal human fluctuations in energy and motivation feel like personal failures. The reality is that even the most successful and productive people experience periods of procrastination and avoidance. The difference isn't that they never struggle with motivation, but rather that they've developed more effective ways of working with their natural rhythms and challenges. They've learned to normalize the experience of resistance while still finding ways to move forward. These myths also promote the idea that productivity is purely a matter of willpower and discipline, ignoring the complex interplay of factors that influence your ability to focus and follow through. This oversimplification leads to solutions that address symptoms rather than causes, creating temporary improvements that don't last because they don't address the underlying dynamics. Understanding the mythology of peak performance can help you develop more realistic expectations for yourself and more compassionate responses to your own struggles. You can recognize that your procrastination doesn't make you fundamentally different from successful people. It makes you human. The goal isn't to become a person who never experiences resistance or avoidance, but to develop greater skill in working with these natural human experiences. This shift in perspective can reduce the shame and self-criticism that often make procrastination worse while opening up space for more effective strategies. The role of identity and narrative. The stories you tell yourself about who you are and what you're capable of profoundly influence your procrastination patterns. These identity narratives often operate below the level of conscious awareness, shaping your behavior in ways that can either support or undermine your goals. If you've internalized a story about being someone who always waits until the last minute, or who works better under pressure, these narratives can become self-fulfilling prophecies that maintain procrastination patterns even when they no longer serve you. Your behavior unconsciously aligns with your identity to maintain consistency and predictability. Sometimes procrastination serves to protect an identity that feels threatened by success or change. If you've always seen yourself as an underachiever or outsider, completing important tasks successfully might challenge this identity in ways that feel destabilizing. Your procrastination might be maintaining psychological safety by preventing you from outgrowing familiar patterns. These identity issues often have roots in early experiences and family dynamics. Messages you received about your capabilities, worth, or role in the family can continue to influence your behavior years later, even when they no longer reflect your current reality or serve your best interests. Examining and potentially updating your identity narratives is often a crucial part of overcoming chronic procrastination. This process involves becoming conscious of the stories you tell yourself, questioning their accuracy and usefulness, and gradually experimenting with new narratives that better support your goals and well-being. The collective dimension of individual struggle. While procrastination feels deeply personal and individual, it's also influenced by collective and societal factors that extend far beyond your personal psychology. The economic system you live within, the technological environment you navigate, and the cultural values that surround you all play a role in shaping your relationship with tasks and productivity. The current economic reality, where job security is increasingly rare and traditional career paths have become less predictable, can make it difficult to invest fully in long-term projects or goals. When the future feels uncertain, your brain might reasonably question whether delaying gratification and working hard toward distant goals is actually adaptive. The attention economy that characterizes modern digital life is designed to capture and monetize your focus, creating an environment that makes sustained attention increasingly difficult. Your procrastination might be, in part, a natural response to an unnatural level of distraction and stimulation. Cultural messages about individual responsibility and self-improvement can also contribute to procrastination by creating unrealistic expectations about what you should be able to accomplish through willpower alone. These messages often ignore the systemic factors that influence behavior, leading to self-blame and shame when individual efforts fall short. Recognizing these collective influences doesn't excuse personal responsibility, but it can help contextualize your struggles and reduce the isolation and self-criticism that often accompany procrastination. You're not struggling in a vacuum. You're navigating real challenges that affect many people in similar ways. Understanding these broader contexts can also help you make more informed choices about how to structure your life and work to support your goals while acknowledging the real constraints and challenges you face. This might involve setting boundaries with technology, creating more realistic expectations about productivity, or finding ways to connect with others who share similar struggles and goals.